I watched my wife publicly humiliate me in front of 10 people at our anniversary dinner party. And I didn't say a single word because I already knew she'd been sleeping with her coworker for 6 months. And in about 5 minutes, her entire world was going to explode in the most spectacular way possible. Let me tell you how we got here. Because 3 weeks ago, I sat through what should have been the worst night of my marriage. But instead, it turned into the most satisfying moment of my entire life. My wife, Kara, had been planning this dinner party for a month, constantly talking about how it was going to be epic and how all her marketing firm colleagues needed to see our beautiful apartment and properly celebrate 4 years of marriage. Looking back, I should have caught on when she insisted I take a personal day to help with setup, something she'd never cared about before, but I figured maybe she was finally making an effort. By 7 p.m., our place looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine, catered Italian food from that expensive spot downtown, perfect lighting, the whole Instagram-worthy production, and for maybe 10 minutes, I actually believed we might have a normal evening. The guests rolled in around 7:30, exactly the crowd I expected, 5 couples from our office, people whose names I barely remembered, the type who humble brag about their second homes and marathon times. Kara was performing from the moment the first person walked through the door, that loud theatrical laugh she does, touching everyone's shoulder when she talks, throwing her head back like every joke is the funniest thing she's ever heard. And I played my usual part as the invisible husband who keeps wine glasses full and makes sure the appetizers stay stocked. About 90 minutes in, everyone had settled into the living room. The wine had been flowing steady, and somebody cracked a joke about marriage killing your social life, and I felt it immediately, that shift in energy where Kara gets a certain look in her eyes. It's this glassy, overexcited expression she gets around her third glass of wine when she wants attention, and I knew exactly where this was headed. One of the wives asked us something generic about keeping things exciting after 4 years together, and Kara let out this sharp laugh and said, "Oh, we definitely don't have that problem," in a tone dripping with sarcasm that made the whole room go awkward quiet before people forced uncomfortable laughs. Then she just kept going. She started making cutting remarks about how I'm extremely punctual in every area of life, how I approach intimacy like assembling IKEA furniture, with the instruction manual and all the steps in perfect order, how she's tempted to set a kitchen timer just to see if I'd even notice. And you could see everyone trying to figure out if they should laugh or pretend they didn't hear it. The husbands were suddenly very interested in their drinks. The wives were exchanging uncomfortable glances, and I just sat there on the arm of the couch with my beer, watching my wife systematically destroy me in front of strangers. She kept escalating, going on about how I'm so methodical and so obsessed with technique that I missed the entire point, and how being intimate with me is like watching someone follow a YouTube tutorial. And I watch people starting to check their phones, looking for exit strategies. One guy attempted to redirect by asking about our vacation plans, but Kara just rolled right over him and said, "Oh, he's fantastic at planning, plans every single detail. That's actually the problem. There's zero spontaneity, zero passion, just task after task after task." And at that point, I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was fascinated watching this train wreck in slow motion. The absolute climax came when she turned and looked directly at me with this cruel little smile and said, "The really sad part is he legitimately thinks he's good at it. Like he genuinely believes he's doing everything right. But honestly, it's just pathetic." And the entire apartment went dead silent. I didn't react, didn't defend myself, didn't say a word, just took a slow sip of my beer and waited because I knew what was coming next. That's when Sloan, Kara's supposed best friend who'd been sitting directly across from us the whole night, suddenly spoke up in a voice that cut through the silence. I'd noticed her watching me all evening with this strange, unreadable expression, and now I understood why. She looked at Kara, then looked at me, then back at Kara, and said very clearly, very deliberately, "That's interesting, Kara, because he's actually incredible. Honestly, one of the most attentive partners I've ever experienced. And I swear you could have heard a pin drop on carpet." Kara's face went through about 5 stages of grief in 3 seconds, from smug to confused to comprehending to absolutely white with shock, her mouth literally hanging open, and every single person in that living room was completely frozen trying to process what they'd just witnessed. I watched Kara's brain completely malfunction in real time, watched her trying to figure out if this was some kind of twisted joke, watched the exact microsecond she realized it absolutely was not. And I just sat there calm as Sunday morning because this was precisely the moment I'd been waiting 6 months for. The room erupted into total chaos, people jumping to their feet, someone's wife frantically grabbing her purse, A couple of the guys trying to act like they'd suddenly gone deaf, and Kara just kept repeating, "What? What? What?" over and over like a scratch CD, while Sloane sat there with this small, satisfied smile. I finally stood up, set my beer down on the coffee table with complete composure, looked around at all these shocked faces, and said very calmly, before anyone leaves and jumps to conclusions, "I think you all deserve to understand exactly how we arrived at this moment. Because this story actually started 6 months ago, and it's considerably more complicated than what you just heard." The truth is I'd known about Kara's affair for 6 months before that dinner party, and every single day I played the role of clueless husband while I systematically built a case that would completely dismantle her life. It started on an unremarkable afternoon when I noticed a text notification pop up on her phone from someone named Jared. And understand, I'm not the type of guy who goes through his wife's phone, but this particular message appeared on her lock screen while her phone was sitting on the couch between us, and it said, "Still thinking about this morning. Can't wait to have you again," followed by 3 fire emojis, and my stomach just dropped. Kara was in the bathroom, and I had maybe 20 seconds, so I grabbed her phone, punched in the passcode I'd watched her enter 1,000 times, and opened that message thread. What I discovered in those 20 seconds before I heard the toilet flush made me want to vomit. 6 solid months of messages, literally hundreds of them, explicit photographs, hotel names and room numbers, specific times and dates, all laid out like evidence for trial. They'd been meeting up at least twice a week, sometimes during lunch breaks, sometimes after work when she claimed she was at spin class or having drinks with the girls, and the messages weren't just about the physical aspect, they were so much worse. She called me boring, said I was like a robot in bed, joked about how I never even realized when she was faking, which was apparently every single time, made fun of the way I organized the pantry and folded towels, said I was useful for stability, but completely unexciting. Jared kept asking, "When are you finally going to leave this guy?" And she'd respond, "Soon, just waiting for the right moment." And they'd laugh about how completely oblivious I was, how easy it was to lie directly to my face. Then I found the message that changed everything, where she explicitly wrote, "He's getting that senior manager promotion next month. Once that goes through and I can figure out the financial situation, I'm out." And suddenly I understood this wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated long-term plan to extract maximum value from me before discarding me. I heard the bathroom door handle turn, and I closed those messages, placed her phone back exactly where it had been, and when Kara walked back in, I was casually scrolling through sports scores on my own phone like nothing happened. She picked up her phone without even glancing at me and went right back to texting, probably him, and I just sat there feeling like someone had scooped out my insides. That night, I didn't sleep 1 minute. Just laid there beside her, replaying every moment of the past year in my head, every excuse, every late evening, every time she'd rolled away from me claiming exhaustion, and suddenly every single piece fit together perfectly. The weird part is I didn't cry, didn't have a breakdown, didn't confront her. I immediately started planning, because that message about my promotion had triggered something cold in my brain, and I realized if I played this correctly, I could completely reverse the power dynamic. The next morning I called in sick, spent 9 hours doing research, found a divorce attorney with excellent reviews, had a phone consultation, and learned some very interesting facts about my legal position. The apartment we lived in, the one Kara loved showing off, was solely mine, purchased 2 years before we even met with inheritance money from my grandfather. Both vehicles were titled in my name because she'd had terrible credit when we got married, and I'd helped her rebuild by putting everything through my accounts. We maintained one joint checking account for shared household expenses, but all our other financial accounts were completely separate, and she earned roughly $35,000 less than me annually. The lawyer essentially told me I was in the strongest possible position for divorce, that she'd have zero claim to the apartment, that I'd likely keep everything, and that documented evidence of infidelity would only strengthen my case. I started building my file immediately, taking screenshots of every message whenever I could access her phone, backing everything up to a secure cloud account she didn't know existed, maintaining a detailed log of every suspicious absence. I opened a new checking account at a different bank and gradually redirected my direct deposits there, leaving just enough in our joint account to cover bills so she wouldn't notice. I pulled every important document from our filing cabinet: birth certificate, passport, insurance paperwork, investment statements, and secured it all in a safe deposit box across town. I went to my boss and told him I needed to postpone that promotion everyone had been planning for me due to personal circumstances, which confused him, but he accepted it. And that single decision completely derailed Kara's entire timeline. Then about 3 weeks before the anniversary dinner, I received an unexpected message from Sloan, Kara's supposed best friend, asking if we could meet privately for coffee. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was some kind of trap, but something about the message felt genuinely urgent, so I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on the opposite side of town where nobody from Kara's office would see us. Sloan showed up looking genuinely nervous, ordered a latte she never touched, and then just unloaded everything. She told me she'd known about the affair for at least 2 months, that literally everyone at their office knew, that people were actively laughing about it behind Kara's back because Jared was married and his wife actually worked in the same building 3 floors up. She told me Kara had already consulted her own divorce lawyer, that she was planning to file immediately after my promotion came through, and that she'd been coaching Jared on his strategy to leave his wife at the same time. But here's where it got really interesting. Sloan wasn't telling me this out of friendship or loyalty. She was telling me because she was absolutely furious that Kara had been using her as an alibi for months, lying to her face. And because apparently Sloan had developed serious feelings for Jared herself and was enraged that he'd chosen Kara instead. Then Sloan dropped the real bomb. She told me that months ago when Kara was out of town, she and Jared had gotten together at a company happy hour and ended up back at her place. So she had firsthand knowledge that could seriously damage Kara's ego and relationship. Sloan looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I want to help you completely destroy her. And I know exactly how to make it happen." And that's when we constructed our plan for the anniversary dinner. Her strategy was brilliantly brutal. At the right moment during the party when Kara was drunk and started tearing me down like Sloan knew she would, Sloan would make an ambiguous claim about us that would sound like a confession of an affair. Whether anything had actually happened between us didn't matter. The accusation alone combined with the way she'd phrase it would detonate everything. And Kara's guilty reaction would expose her own affair with Jared, even if my supposed involvement with Sloan was completely fabricated. It was psychological warfare at its finest. I went home that afternoon, had my lawyer finalize all the divorce paperwork, got everything ready to file, and then I simply waited. I watched Kara excitedly plan that party, watched her texting Jared about how it would be hilarious to roast me in front of her colleagues, watched her pick out the perfect outfit to wear while she humiliated her husband, and I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt nothing except ice-cold determination and the quiet confidence that comes from holding all the cards while your opponent thinks they're winning. So we're back in that living room with 10 shocked people staring at me like I'd just announced I was actually an alien, Kara's face completely drained of blood, and Sloan sitting there with that victorious little smirk. I let the silence hang heavy for a long moment, let everyone fully process what I'd just said about this story starting 6 months ago, and then I calmly pulled out my phone and opened the cloud storage folder I'd been meticulously building. Kara immediately understood what was happening. She literally jumped up from the couch and screamed, "Don't you dare!" But it was far too late for that. I was completely done protecting her carefully constructed image. I started reading the text messages out loud. Not all of them because we'd be there until sunrise, but the absolute greatest hits, the ones where she called me pathetic and boring, where she laughed about faking every single intimate moment we'd shared in 4 years, where she and Jared planned out their beautiful future together after they both dumped their respective spouses, where she specifically stated she was waiting for my promotion to go through before filing so she could maximize the divorce settlement, and I watched every single person in that room physically recoil. One of the wives audibly gasped and grabbed her husband's arm. Another couple just stood up and walked straight toward the exit without saying a word, and the men all had this look of absolute horror because they were suddenly realizing they'd spent the past 90 minutes laughing at jokes about a man whose wife was actively plotting his destruction. Kara kept desperately trying to interrupt, saying, "That's not what it looks like. You're taking everything out of context." But I just kept reading, kept systematically showing everyone exactly who she really was. And with each message I read out loud, I watched her carefully built social circle disintegrate in real time. Then I got to my favorite part. I pulled up the message thread between Kara and Sloan, the ones where Kara complained about having to constantly use Sloan as her alibi, where she called Sloan kind of desperate and pathetic, and said she only maintained the friendship because Sloan was incredibly useful for cover stories. And the expression on Sloan's face when she realized I was exposing her role too was absolutely magnificent. Sloan immediately tried to backtrack, started saying, "Wait, hold on, I was trying to help you." But I just looked directly at her and said, "You weren't trying to help me, Sloan. You were trying to hurt Kara because you wanted Jared for yourself, and you're just as manipulative as she is. You just hide it better." And that's when the last remaining guest literally fled for the door. Within about 90 seconds, that living room went from 10 people to just 3. Me, Kara, and Sloan. And the silence was absolutely deafening except for Kara's hyperventilating and Sloane's angry breathing. Kara completely collapsed onto the couch and started crying. Not genuine sad crying, but that calculated manipulative crying she does when she needs sympathy. And she kept repeating, "It was a mistake, just a stupid mistake. We can fix this," over and over like a broken recording. I walked very calmly over to where my jacket was hanging by the front door, reached into the inside pocket, pulled out a manila envelope, and dropped it onto the coffee table directly in front of her. She stared at that envelope like it was a venomous snake, wouldn't touch it, just kept staring, and I said in the calmest voice I could manage, "Those are divorce papers. I'm filing first thing tomorrow morning at the courthouse. And just so we're completely clear, you're getting absolutely nothing." And then I explained to her in detail exactly what my attorney had told me. The apartment was mine from before we ever met, purchased with inheritance money. Both cars were titled solely in my name. Our finances were mostly separate except for one household account. I had 6 full months of meticulously documented infidelity, complete with timestamps and hotel locations, and I'd already quietly moved the majority of my money into accounts she couldn't access. I told her she had until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live because this was my property and I wanted her completely out. And the look of utter devastation on her face when she finally understood she'd been outplayed at her own game was almost worth 6 months of torture. She immediately tried the apologetic routine, actually got down on her knees, grabbed both my hands, said, "I love you. I made a terrible mistake. Please don't do this to us." But it was so transparently hollow and performative that it was almost funny. I pulled my hands away and told her the complete truth without any anger or emotion, just facts. I said, "You don't love me, Kara. You never actually loved me as a person. You loved what I provided. You loved the financial stability and this apartment and the comfortable life, but you never loved who I actually am. And honestly, I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just genuinely relieved this is finally over." And something in her just snapped because she went from begging to absolute rage in half a second. She started screaming about how I'd regret this decision, how she'd make my life hell, how I was going to die alone and miserable. And Sloan was just standing there incredibly awkwardly trying to figure out whether she should leave or stay. I told Sloan she needed to leave immediately, and she tried one final manipulation tactic, walked up close to me, and said, "You know, we could actually be really good together. I wasn't lying about what I said earlier." And I actually laughed right in her face. I told her I would genuinely rather be alone for the rest of my life than get involved with someone equally as manipulative as my soon-to-be ex-wife, just with a different strategy, and she absolutely lost it and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough that a framed picture fell off the wall and shattered. That night, I slept in the guest room with the door locked while Kara cried in our former bedroom. And first thing the next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office and officially filed everything. Over the following 2 weeks, everything fell apart for Kara in the most spectacularly beautiful way possible. The screenshots I displayed at the party had been secretly recorded on at least 3 different phones and somehow circulated through her entire office within 48 hours. Sloan had vindicatively sent comprehensive evidence of the affair directly to their HR department, and both Kara and Jared were terminated for violating the company's explicit workplace relationship policy. Jared's wife obviously found out through the office gossip network, immediately filed for divorce, and apparently created this incredibly detailed social media post about the entire affair that went viral in their friends' circles and absolutely destroyed both their reputations. Kara tried desperately to stay with various friends, but apparently nobody wanted to house someone who'd been publicly exposed as a serial liar and calculated cheater. And she eventually had no choice but to move back in with her parents who lived 3 states away. The absolute perfect cherry on top happened approximately 3 months after that anniversary dinner party. I was home alone for the first time in months, finally feeling genuine peace in my own space, just heating up some leftover pizza and watching the playoffs, when my doorbell rang at almost 9:30 at night. I looked through the peephole, and there stood both Kara and Sloan in my hallway, and I could literally hear them arguing before I even opened the door. I cracked the door open about 4 inches with the security chain still in place and asked what they wanted, and they both immediately started talking over each other, Kara claiming she needed to pick up some belongings she'd left behind, Sloan saying she needed to talk to me urgently about something important, and then right there they turned on each other. Right there in my apartment hallway, they started absolutely screaming about whose fault this entire disaster was. Sloan calling Kara a manipulative user who deserved everything she got. Kara screaming that Sloan was pathetic and obsessed and had ruined everything. And it literally escalated into them physically pushing each other. I told them both very clearly that I was calling the police immediately if they didn't leave in the next 30 seconds, stepped back inside my apartment, and firmly locked the door while they continued their dramatic screaming match in the public hallway. I could hear them yelling at each other all the way down to the elevator, heard the doors finally close, and then blessed silence. I walked back to my reheated pizza, sat down on my couch in my apartment that was finally just mine, and started genuinely laughing because the entire situation was so absurdly, perfectly karmic it felt like fiction. The woman who'd spent years systematically making me feel small and inadequate and worthless had lost her job, her entire friend group, her home, and every shred of dignity, all because she couldn't resist the urge to publicly humiliate me one final time in front of an audience. The divorce went through without any contest whatsoever because she had absolutely no legal or moral leg to stand on. Her lawyer apparently advised her to just sign everything and move on. These days, I'm genuinely doing better than I have in years. I started seeing a therapist to work through all the manipulation I'd endured. I accepted that promotion I'd strategically postponed. And I'm actually seeing someone new I met at an industry conference who treats me like an actual human being with value instead of a utility to exploit. Sometimes late at night, I think about that anniversary dinner and how differently everything could have gone if I'd just confronted Kara privately. But honestly, I don't regret the public exposure even slightly, because she made the calculated choice to humiliate me in front of an audience for her own entertainment, and karma simply returned that favor with compound interest. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.